What's up, gamers? You're watching Papa Jumpluff, and today we're back with another deck profile. Today we're going to go over a deck that I've seen a lot of recent success with. It's gone through a couple different iterations of names. I've seen it called Zapdos Steelix. I've seen it called Metal Zapdos. And most recently, I decided to call it GS Zapdos after the GS ball, because it contains, a lightning or electric Pokemon. They're symbolizing the gold, and then the metal symbolizing the silver. So it's just just thought it was a cool name. Maybe it'll change again, who knows? But for all intents and purposes, we'll just refer to it as Zapdos Steelix for today. So to start off with the Pokemon, this deck only utilizes 3 Cleffa, and it's a bit of a meme. Cleffa is very good, but this was to prove that you don't actually need 4 Cleffa in every single deck. Could it use a fourth Cleffa? Absolutely. Does it need a 4th Cleffa? I don't really think so. I took this to a Wotc20 tournament on November 4th, which was this last Saturday, and I went 3-0, and I utilized Eek 1 time in the entire event, and it was in the middle of round 3, and it was good. Eek is a very good move. Didn't really need it to win the event, though. So, results versus theory. I think Cleffa is very good, and if you were going to build this deck and you want to use a 4th Cleffa, definitely go for it. It's not incorrect to do so. So we've got the 3 Cleffa. We've got 4 of the Rocket Zapdos, thankfully reprinted in the Celebration set, making it a far less expensive copy to obtain, and also a very, very good haymaker in the Wotc20 format. You have Plasma. Well, first off, you have 70 HP on a basic. Excellent. No weakness, and a resistance to fighting. Somewhat relevant. There's not a lot of fighting decks in the metagame where we play. Wish there were more, but it's good. And then retreat cost of 2 is like whatever. Plasma for 20 damage. With Plasma, you are effectively ramping with the Rocket Zapdos as long as you have a Lightning Energy in your discard pile. So it's not a choice. You do have to take the Lightning Energy and attach it to the Zapdos. Late game, when you have low HP on your Zapdos, it makes Electro Burn worse. But you may just be riding on Plasma for the rest of those remaining turns that you're utilizing the Rocket Zapdos, which is totally fine. You're going to lose those Lightning Energy anyway. Or maybe you use 2 of the Lightning Energy to retreat it for the retreat cost. Also, Electro Burn, 70 damage for 4 energy, and then you're dealing recoil damage to yourself equal to the number of Lightning Energy attached to Rocket Zapdos. Now, this is mitigated by the Metal Energy that you are hopefully attaching to the Rocket Zapdos, because Metal Energy on a non-metal Pokemon is reducing the damage output by 10 because it's not a metal Pokemon. And then also, as a blanket effect on metal and non-metal Pokemon, you are reducing incoming damage. So because Rocket Zapdos is dealing the recoil damage is reduced by 10, and then because it's receiving the recoil damage, it's reduced by another 10. Therefore, the math becomes Rocket Zapdos uses Electro Burn with 3 Lightning Energy and 1 Metal Energy. It is dealing 60 damage to the opponent, and it is receiving only 10 damage as recoil, which is very good numbers based on that ruling for Metal Energy. So we'll move on from there. I really like 4 Rocket Zapdos because it's also a very great turn 1 attacker. You place this out with a Lightning Energy and a Strength Charm, and you are able to sometimes knock out your opponent's turn 1 Cleffa, which can be game breaking in this format. It's very good. But unfortunately, with the baby rule, it is on a coin flip. So got to be a little careful with that one. Sometimes your setup turns can be better utilized. And then we've got 2 Electabuzz, just a classic haymaker. You have Thunder Punch, Thunder Shock is the first attack. Thunder Shock deals 10 damage, and then on a coin flip, you can paralyze your opponent's Pokemon. Really good for 1 energy. And then solid attack for 2 energy with Thunder Punch. You are flipping a coin. On a heads, you are doing 30 damage plus 10 more damage to the opponent's Pokemon. On a tails, you are doing 30 damage to the opponent's Pokemon and receiving 10 recoil damage. We're not going to put Metal Energy on this Pokemon. It's just a very good Haymaker with 70 HP, high HP basic Pokemon. Another 2 energy to retreat it, but that's kind of fine. You'll realize later on that this is a heavy scoop up deck, so it plays high HP Pokemon that demand to be knocked out in 1 hit. Otherwise, we can just scoop them up, and it's no longer an issue. So you're denying knockouts in this deck, while also putting out really good damage with efficient attacks that require low energy investment. Next up is the Steelix package. So I'm running 3 copies of the Southern Island Onyx. It's the best Onyx in the game, in my opinion. It has 90 HP, which is very high. And you're not running any fighting energy, so we're really just using Slam, which for a double colorless energy or 2 energy of whatever, you are able to flip 2 coins and deal 20 damage times the number of heads. So why is this good? Strong Pokemon like Chansey and Wigglytuff take a lot of damage from this Pokemon, and colorless decks have been on the rise. Not always necessarily with any one of those Pokemon, because there are Dragonite decks running around, and that's not weak to fighting, but this is extremely good against Wigglytuff, and this is extremely good against Chansey. For the situations where it's not as good, we run 2 copies of the Aquapolis Steelix. Just a very, very strong Pokemon that deals spread damage. For the first attack, Earth Rift, it's a double colorless energy, and you are able to deal 10 damage to the opponent's active Pokemon and each bench Pokemon they control. The downside to that is you have to flip a coin, and the result of the coin flip determines whether or not you can use the attack again the following turn. But still very good. 60 damage. If your opponent has a full field, 60 damage for a double colorless energy is very fair. Well, probably not fair. That's not the word. It's very effective. And then, if you can't use it on the following turn, it also has 100 HP. So it's not going down in 1 strike unless your opponent has a fire-type Pokemon. Another type that's kind of lacking in the metagame, at least in the local scene right now. The other attack is Iron Smash, which requires the same double colorless energy plus 2 metal energy. We're not really using that attack that much in this deck because we're not using rainbow energy to mitigate the cost of only having access to 4 metal energy. So we're rarely committing to an Iron Smash, but we can. And that's it's worded a little bit strangely. So the damage indicator is set to 50 plus, but the best way to think of it is you're flipping 2 coins. Both results are heads, then you are dealing 70 damage. If one result is heads, one result is tails, you are dealing 50 damage. If both results are tails, you are dealing 0 damage with Steelix. So that's the easiest way to think about it, and it's also just fine to attach 1 metal energy to Steelix to give it that 10 damage reduction on incoming attacks from the metal energy, because it's not going to reduce the amount of damage output that your Earth Rift does. So yeah, just all good things with Steelix. It's very powerful. It's been proven to be very good in this format, and yeah, moving on from there. See, we've got 3 copies of Neo Genesis Pichu, and again, I went with Japanese because they are significantly less expensive to purchase in Japanese. But it has the baby rule, and it has no weakness, no resistance, no retreat cost. So you're free retreating with this. For 1 energy, you get to use Zap, which deals 20 damage to each Pokemon in play that has a Pokemon power. So for the purposes of Wotc20, Pokebodies and Pokepowers from the Skyridge, Aquapolis, and Expedition sets, they are subtypes of Pokemon powers. So yes, this will still deal damage to those Pokemon. And 20 damage per is very good. If your opponent is on an ability-heavy deck, this can be extremely potent. Not so much against bats. Bats kind of get around this, and it's like, just don't play this against bats. But against ability-heavy decks like that are using Furet or Dark Dragonair, even there's just plenty of decks that this is good against. Plenty of utility Pokemon that this is good against, and it's even stronger if you are going to equip a Strength Charm to this Pokemon. It's also very annoying to deal with if you put a Focus Band on this Pokemon. Focus Band making it take, not only the initial baby flip in order to land the attack, but also requiring a second coin flip to see if you can knock it out. So it pushes the odds heavy in Pichu's favor with a Focus Band, and you just get turn after turn of just harassing Pokemon that have a Pokemon power and being very resilient as a Pokemon with no retreat cost. So if the Focus Band procs and it's time to remove it, just retreat it out of there. And then the final Pokemon, it's kind of a non-bow with Pichu, but then again, just don't attack with Pichu if you're going to bench your Raikou. So we play 1 Raikou, the Holo version from Neo Revelation, for the Pokemon Power Lightning Burst. This Pokemon Power is, it basically says anytime you attach a Lightning Energy to Raikou, you're forcing your opponent to switch their active Pokemon with one of their benched Pokemon. Why is this good? So if you have a Cleffa in your active slot and your opponent has a Cleffa in their active slot but no other benched babies, you can attach a Lightning Energy to Raikou and force their Cleffa out of the active slot so that your Eek is no longer on a coin flip. You don't have to flip a coin because they have a baby Pokemon in play in the active slot. You can also just say you have a fully charged up Zapdos and you are, utilizing Haymaker attacks, and it's time to continue putting damage on your opponent's Pokemon. You're already fully energized with that Zapdos. You might as well stick one on Raikou and force the baby Pokemon that they're hiding behind out of the active slot, so that you can land those hits, so that you can put out that damage. So it's very good in some situations, hence why we are only running 1 copy of this Raikou. It's also not cheap, so grabbing the 1 Raikou feels good on the wallet, and it also feels good in certain game states. So that's going to do it for the Pokemon. We're going to move on to the trainers. So here we are utilizing 3 Professor Oak. 2 is the standard for many decks in the format. We're using 3 because of Rocket Zapdos. We don't really mind discarding Lightning Energy because we're going to be able to get it back with Plasma from Rocket Zapdos. So we are able to refill our hand and kind of set up a ramp, a few ramp turns with Professor Oaks. So very good card in this deck. I like it more than Professor Elm in this list. Next, we've got 1 Copycat. I like to have 4 trainers that draw cards in all of my lists, so we're playing a Copycat. Because if your opponent utilizes Eek and you don't have a Cleffa, you are able to benefit off of their Eek by shuffling your hand into the deck, drawing 7 cards to copy what your opponent has in hand, and then you can go from there, because this is a supporter, so you can play other trainers, you just can't play other supporters. Next is, we've got 2 copies of Item Finder. Just again, utilizing Item Finder to reuse trainers that you've already used or that you may have discarded off of Professor Oak. Very, very strong card. And next we've got 2 copies of Oracle in this deck. I am a big fan of Oracle, especially in this deck where I'm not using computer search. I like to use Oracle to find whatever I need for the situation, but being that there's only 4 copies of double colorless energy in the deck, you can place one of those on top of your deck. You also only have 4 copies of metal energy, so you can place 2 copies of metal energy on top of your deck if you're trying to get to an Iron Smash with your Steelix, or if you have a Zapdos and an Onyx, put 1 metal energy, put 1 double colorless energy, put a double colorless energy and a Gust of Wind. It's so good, and you set up your following turns because you're not doing a whole lot of eking in this deck. Maybe once or twice a game, but you're not going to eke after you've oracled because you've placed essential cards on top of your deck. Now, what you could do is oracle and then follow it up with a Professor Oak to get those 2 cards to hand immediately, and while refilling your hand in the process. So that's extremely strong. Here I've seen decks use Oracle and Bill because that is like a double computer search, and at the cost of not discarding any cards. You are just using 1 supporter and 1 trainer in that case, but in this deck we're just using Oracle, and then every once in a while we Oracle followed by Oak. Next we've got 2 copies of Gust of Wind. It's standard. I've seen decks maximize on Gust of Wind, and this deck could, but I've got other trainers that I thought were more important. It's just, take your opponent's baby out of the active slot and put an attacker that you want to put damage onto with Gust of Wind. Sometimes you've already placed bench damage on a Pokemon, say with Earth Rift or with Pichu's Zap, and you want to pull it to the active slot and get the rest of the damage in order to get the knockout with a Zapdos Electro Burn or with a Electabuzz Thunder Punch. Just great card all around. And we've got 1 copy of Pokemon Fan Club. There are so many basic Pokemon in this deck, and yes, it is very good to tutor out the specific basic Pokemon that you want. However, the counts of basic Pokemon that you have really promote consistency. So, and the card draw that you have can really get you there. You're not looking to fill the bench as fast as possible with this deck. So if your opening hand, contains 3 basic Pokemon, you don't always want to put all 3 out. You might just want 1 in the active slot and 1 on the bench, and then, if the 1 in the active slot is Cleffa and the 1 you keep in your hand is a second copy of Cleffa, I'd say you've done well. You don't really need more than 1 Cleffa at all in this deck, especially if one of them is Pichu. You don't really need 2 copies of Pichu, but we have 3 copies of each Cleffa and Pichu. I just have this philosophy where if you want to see it once per game, play 3 copies. If you want to see it more than once per game, play 4 copies. If you want to see it every other game, play 2 copies. It's working. It's still gathering data, but that philosophy seems to be ideal for Wotc20. But yeah, Pokemon Fan Club, every once in a while you just can't find the exact thing that you're looking for, and being that it says up to 2 baby Pokemon or basic Pokemon, you can just grab 1 and then move on with your turn. So very good. And then the next card is my favorite card in the deck. I have 4 copies of Scoop Up, and I explained it earlier a little bit. Scoop Up is extremely good in this deck. With so many large basic Pokemon with very high HP, you can... It is a very modal card in this deck. So common thing that happens is your opponent will Gust of Wind an Onyx into the active slot because Onyx has a very high retreat cost. Well, that's great, except you only need 1 energy in order to attack with that Onyx. So, and yes, it's double colorless energy. So you can get in a couple turns of attacking with that Onyx, and then once they've put between 60 and 80 damage onto the Onyx, you just scoop up and get the Onyx out of there. You don't even have to worry about finding a warp energy. You just take the Onyx out of there, deny the knockout, and then move up something else that you've been putting energy onto, because it only took one turn to fully energize that Onyx. Next, you know, that's two scenarios in one. You can also just use it to pick up a Zapdos that's got too much damage on it and then rebench it. Why is that good? Well, the Zapdos is going to put the electric energy back in the back into the discard pile, and you only need one more lightning energy to start to re-energize and re-ramp with the same Zapdos. So you get to recycle that energy because you used Scoop Up and you lost the energy. Like, oh no. Same thing with Electabuzz, although sometimes when you've got enough damage on the Electabuzz and you scoop it up, you're just doing it to deny the knockout. And Electabuzz isn't the main attacker in the deck. It's just like early game, you can put out some serious damage, but once it's done, it's kind of done. So you pick it up with Scoop Up and pitch it to a item finder. You know, find something else that you need. But Scoop Up really shines in this deck. So many applications in a deck like this. Highly recommend testing it out in other decks. But so good here. Oh, another thing I almost forgot to mention. It is not incorrect to scoop up a Steelix. Yes, you only take the basic Pokemon form and add that back to your hand. So you will be discarding the Steelix and discarding any other energies that are attached to the Steelix. But sometimes you need a fighting type attacker for a situation. So you pick up the Steelix, replay the Onyx, suddenly you have a fighting type attacker, and you're ready to go with just a double colorless energy or two attaches while it's on the bench. Next, we've got 3 Strength Charm. So we're playing Strength Charm with the text box that it was printed with in Expedition. There was an errata later on, which gives it basically the same wording as Plus Power, where it only deals the additional damage to the opponent's active Pokemon. But for this printing, it was printed with text that says that it deals 10 more damage with any attack. So Earth Rift will deal 20 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon. And you think about that, where for the cost of a double colorless energy, you are putting out 120 damage on your opponent's full field. Think about it as well with the application with Pichu. For 1 energy, you are dealing 30 damage to each of their Pokemon that has a Pokemon power. Extremely powerful card, very inexpensive. I recommend some number of these in a deck that is dealing spread damage these days. Next, I have 1 copy of Focus Band. This is very good to attach to a Pichu, and you get that double lifeline by having the baby rule and also the Focus Band on your side, keeping the Pichu out and constantly putting out damage on your opponent's Pokemon that have Pokemon powers. And this was a meta decision. There's a lot of colorless decks showing up in the metagame in my local scene. So we're using 1 copy of Sprout Tower. It's a stadium. You can otherwise use it to deny your opponent's stadium, but for this, we're reducing colorless Pokemon's attacks by 30 damage. So after applying weakness and resistance, of course. But this is extremely effective against Wigglytuff. Extremely effective against Chansey, unbelievably effective against many Dragonite cards, and it completely shuts off Furet's ability to attack with Spinning Attack. That's Furet that a lot of people are using as a utility Pokemon, because it has a Pokemon power that allows them to shuffle any 2 cards from their hand back into the deck to find any energy card and add it to their hand. Many players are using Furet for that ability, and also prevents them from decking out, because they can just constantly put 2 cards from their hand back into their deck and find nothing. So Sprout Tower, very good meta call. Could be anything else if your metagame does not have colorless Pokemon. And now we're on to the energy. So taking a look at this, I have 4 copies of Metal Energy. Like I said, it's necessary for the most effective way to play Rocket Zapdos, and it is also attached to Steelix, reducing incoming damage, and sometimes you're gonna want to Iron Smash. So you'll need to dedicate 2 of these. You just got to be careful with these, and when your opponent has an energy removal heavy deck, they're obviously going to go after these. You know, just plan accordingly with your lines. Next, we've got 4 copies of Double Colorless Energy. This is for your Steelix, your Onyx, really just those. I've unfortunately had to stick one of these onto a Cleffa before just to eke once, but you do what you got to do. It's still just a great card in this deck, energizing multiple Pokemon with just 1 attach. And we've got 2 copies of Warp Energy. 2 copies of Warp Energy is standard in a lot of decks, but you know, using it to pull back a Onyx or Steelix that you don't want to scoop up because it's got an energy attached, or a double colorless energy, or some amount of metal energy attached, you can kind of conserve those energy by utilizing a Warp Energy attached for the turn. And also, you know, using this with an Electro Burn Zapdos that doesn't have a metal energy at least reduces the recoil from 40 down to 30 if you have 3 electric energy and 1 warp energy instead of 4 full electric energy. So there's that, and then I've got 12 copies of a lightning energy. Just consistent energy. So I guess overall the energy count is 22 in this deck, which is a little high. So I've seen a lot of decks go 20 Pokemon, 20 trainers, 20 energy, but being that, you know, you're being a little loose with your electric energy and hoping to re-energize Zapdos with plasma, it's fine to have a higher count of electric energy, especially with the amount of times that you'll be able to utilize this on Raikou as a Cyclone energy, just to get baby Pokemon out of your opponent's active slot so you can keep the damage output going. So yeah, that's the deck. That's GS Zapdos for now. It's still what we're calling it. But thanks for watching. Hope you guys decide to give one of these decks a try. And let me know what you think in the comments. If there's any cards that you would change out, be happy to hear about it. Thanks.